gang is back together. Kyle and Jen Carter, Kinsey, me, the OGs, if you will, are back for office hours. And we're all so excited. And we're especially excited because you've made our jobs incredibly easy this week. This isn't anything goes office hours. Ask an expert, whichever you prefer. And you guys requested that. So you gave us the idea. And then you've also given us all the questions. So we have a thread on Facebook with probably 25 amazing questions right now. So that's very exciting. They're so thoughtful and good, and some are fun and some are serious, and we love them all. So before we dive into those, first of all, Kyle and Jen, thank you for being here. I know you guys have both had a really big day. Kyle, you did a 3-phase on 2 horses today in addition to riding the rest. And Jen, I'm sure you had a million things going on as well. So thank you so much for making time to do Ask an Expert with us.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Good to see you guys again.
We're going to take those amazing questions and make them really awful answers.
You couldn't do that if you tried. Well, maybe Kinsey, I could hand it over to you. You can choose our first one and we'll just tick as many. Usually we do a little bit of chit chat at the beginning, but because we have so many questions and we want to get to them, let's just jump in, and Kins, we'll trade off. We'll try to mix some fun ones in, and anyone who's watching live, as always, feel free to send your questions in the chat too, and we'll try to get to those as well.
Perfect. Well, I'm going to start you guys off with some of the fun ones because, I mean, they're all fun, let's be honest, but some of them are easier than others. So let's warm ourselves up with Krista's questions, which her first question, and each of you are going to answer this individually, is what is your favorite book?
Oh, you caught me right off guard. That's the problem with questions like that is it's like there's so many things to think about.
Yeah. I don't know if I could pick one favorite. I have a few.
Yeah, if it's all right. I mean, that's sort of the thing is so why don't you start?
Oh, God. Well, I love mysteries. I just absorb myself in those typically, so I don't have one favorite. Some of the ones I remember reading over and over and over growing up is Gone with the Wind, and I know it's kind of cheesy, but I loved it. That one is really the one that sticks out the most right now. So I'm going to hand it over to Kyle.
So basically, if you actually were to take the computer and turn it around, there's a bookshelf full of like stacked books that have been read and some reread, and then in our bedroom there's another, and then beside the table there's like 4 or 5 books and magazines and everything. But unlike Sinead, who reads highbrow, educational, emotional, I kind of have a smattering of stuff. Like I loved the Harry Potter series. I loved creativity of it. Lord of the Rings is a big go-to for me because I can pick it up, read a bit, and then put it down. And I probably read the books like 5 to 8 times. But Total Loss, which is a book on sailing disasters. I love sailing. I always read about, like any sailing adventures and stuff, like sailing around the world, Old Man in the Sea, those sorts of things. But Total Loss is really good because it just shows you like how desperate things can get and then how sometimes you come out of it anyways. And I just love that because it's real life stuff. There's a great book, and I just can't remember the name of, with Shackleton's adventure not adventure, but when he got the Endeavour, I think it was, crushed in the ice floe in Antarctica and then had to sail 1,800 miles in an open boat with his crew. Like it's just incredible what people can do. And I love that stuff. But I'm going to recommend one for everybody. If you want like a psyche one, it's called There's No Perfect in Golf or something. That is a really good one for your headspace. But if you want one that kind of will make you'll read it and you'll be like, oh my God, that's people. Oh my God, that's people. It's called A Confederacy of Dunces. I always recommend it. I lend it to people. It's kicking around here somewhere. I've lent one out, never got it back. So I bought another one. If you open it up, there's pages that are like leafed in there because it's been read and opened so many times. But what's great about it is the foreword. So I can't answer this short. It's a work of fiction, but in the foreword, the guy who wrote the foreword was an English professor in New Orleans, and this mother of the writer came into his office and handed him this manuscript. He's like, it happens all the time. And I thought when I read that, I was like, it's just like horses, people showing up and being like, oh, can you tell me about, and then he's like, and usually they just want you to read this stuff and it's all crap. And he's like, this lady was like, I really want you to read this. My son wrote it and all that. And he's like, I felt like at least I should pick it up and read a chapter or part of a chapter. He's like, I was certain I'd be able to get halfway through and then be like, rubbish, and not have to read anymore. And he started reading it and it drew him in, and he finished reading it and then got it published, like went out, got it published. It won a Pulitzer Prize back in like 1967. But it is so the American, or probably American, sort of like the not like the downside of the we're so important sort of thing. And it's all fiction, but the part that got me to actually pick it up and read it was recommended by a friend of mine. And then in the foreword, the last thing that he writes in there is that the guy who wrote it thought he was a failure. He'd gone through college. He was young. He was in his early 20s, and he committed suicide because he couldn't see himself being successful. And here he had this book he'd already written, and he'd never taken it to get it like published. And this would have changed everything for him. And it just really, the reality of that, and then the way that this guy writes it, like the main character will, like, he'll drive you crazy. Like, he just frustrates the heck out of you because it's like just that personality. So I love that book for people because it always elicits a response.
Beautiful answers and so on brand. Jen, Gone with the Wind. Kyle. But I absolutely love it. Those are very interesting book. Just actually, it's interesting to learn about you guys and good book recommendations.
What about you guys?
Yeah.
My favorite book is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. It's a historical fiction book around World War II, and it's amazing. Kristen Hanna has written some incredible ones, and there's one that's escaping me. Kinsey, you answer, and I'll look up what this other one is called that she wrote.
I think I've read that book, actually, Kinsey. I'm not very good with names, but I'm pretty sure that I've read that.
It's a go-to. I think.
Oh, The Great Alone was the other one.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that's it. That's my favorite.
So
The Great Alone is so. Jen, have you read that?
I haven't, but I've heard of it.
It is
recommend it?
So good. Okay, yeah, The Great Alone, hands down, favorite book.
I'm going to throw another one in there that people should read.
Kyle.
Gentleman in Moscow is incredible because it shows the history as Russia changed over to the communist regime through the eyes of an aristocrat who ends up in a substandard situation, but is like almost embrace the ideology and stuff. And it's just beautifully written. Like, you feel like you're there. Okay, I'm done.
That was The Gentleman in Moscow?
A Gentleman in Moscow, yeah.
Okay.
I just saw in the chat, Courtney has arrived, which is perfect because I had her question queued up. So Courtney, welcome. You are just on time. All you've missed is one question. So Courtney asked a question on Facebook, and it's for Jen. She's said, what's the workout routine that you use after having a baby to get back in the saddle? She said, I feel like I need some out of the saddle work before getting on my spicy mare. I'm worried I won't be as capable of sitting her antics now, but I have no idea where to start with my fitness.
Sorry, Kyra wants to take this one for you.
Kyra.
Well, I mean, I wish I had a specific one, but so obviously you guys all know we run a lot. I ran maybe not as much the first time I was pregnant, but definitely with my second one, I ran as much as I could. I walked, I rode, I did everything to keep just fit and loose. Once I had them both, I was back in the saddle 2 weeks after both of them. So I don't know that I necessarily did anything specific to getting back in shape because I don't really feel like I lost my shape that much. So I think the big thing I would recommend is make sure you do take it slow because your ligaments stretch. You definitely, I will say that is one thing I did notice is I felt a little bit looser in the tack. Just, your body went through a traumatic experience, so you do have to take the time to let everything kind of tighten back up. I think walking, and I mean, not everyone likes to run, but I think walking is a really good thing. A lot of people use yoga. I'm not a fan, but I can recommend it. It's just me personally, but I think it would probably be yoga or Pilates would probably be what I would recommend for someone. I wish I could be more helpful, but I didn't have anything specific. I just kind of kept on doing what I was doing before I got pregnant, during pregnancy, and I just kind of carried with it.
I'm sort of disappointed that you didn't direct this question to me. Like, I have all the answers for this, and she didn't ask.
I know. Well, would you guys like Kyle to answer?
No. I will say, Courtney, you have a valid concern. I've seen you on your horse, and that horse is sharp. I mean, look, you ride it well enough, but you know that it's quick, and you don't want to get into a game that the horse is going to outthink you on. I would actually really recommend making sure that you're getting on a few quiet horses first to build your strength back up, because the one thing is Jen rode quite late into her pregnancy, and she's a little bit psycho. So like the day after, 2 days after having one of them, she was at the show teaching.
Oh yeah.
Like,
okay, yeah.
so it's not like, it's not a normal, because we don't live a normal lifestyle, it kind of probably was a little different for her. But your horse is like, it's athletic and it's prone to use that athleticism against you, or not even against you, but you're going to have to deal with that. Make sure that you're lined up to win the battle of if it does something, because it's got to be safe for you.
Yeah, if you do have the opportunity to ride some quiet ones, I would recommend that, because your balance is different. You do need to definitely get your sea legs back underneath you.
And get someone else on her for a little bit too, because you don't need to be taking the wind out of her sails while you're not quite balanced. Like, ride her in water jumps and stuff like that to slow her movement down and stuff like that. If you had snow in Tennessee, but I don't think you're going to get that this time of year. Stuff just to keep you on the upside of it all. I know that's not advice on strength, but just for your safety and everything, I think you have to think that way.
Courtney added in chat that she has her saintly retired mare, so that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ride it.
her.
Just get strong.
Yep, I agree. Get everything back to what it was.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you for the question, Courtney. That was a great one. Okay, so Kate is asking, she said she has a freshly retired thoroughbred that was successful, that was a successful distance turf horse. He won his last race in November at 7 years old. Laughing face. Needless to say, he has endurance to spare. Outside, he tends to be a bit reactive, and she's been working towards redirecting his outbursts into more productive outlets. For example, instead of flying...
Kins, we lost your microphone, but don't worry.
Yes.
I know where these questions are, unless you can come back.
Because we'd be kind of screwed
Just
otherwise.
sitting here, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Now we
Yes.
can hear you.
Okay, where did you lose me?
At the you hadn't said the 15-meter circle yet. The outburst.
Example, instead of flying across the ring, they go into a 15-meter circle and some figure eights until they've found their brain again. Her question is, when it comes to start reintroducing him to work in an open field, what would your suggestions be for setting themselves up for success and preventing turf racing flashbacks? She knows she's going to be thankful for his endurance down the line, and she plans to event him, but curious how you've approached this phase on similar horses. Thanks in advance.
Just hang on and let him run it out. So a couple of things. One, I think turf horses tend to be a little less, they tend to not be quite as sharp. And I don't mean he might be quite sharp, but turf horses tend to gallop a little more sensibly, and they tend to use that endurance and longevity, and their speed is consistent or more consistent than on the dirt. So that's a benefit probably for you. Plus, in my experience, the horses that raced a long time usually aren't dumb. The really hot ones typically are done at 3. Horses that go until they're 7 or 9 or whatever typically know how to handle themselves. So you're hopefully on the right type to be doing this with. I would go out when you go out to your open field, and I would create a area with rails so that you have a boundary that is visual but not constricting him. So it's not like we usually take ours and we start them in a paddock, a smaller paddock. Well, we start them usually in a round pen, but if they've raced, we start them in a paddock, smaller paddock. Then we go to a little larger paddock and then a larger paddock. Now we have that available to us here. And then our rings are wide open, but like they have like telephone poles or railway ties around them just to sort of give a barrier. And that horses get very good about kind of seeing that as a line. So you would probably go out, make start in your paddocks and then make like a 20 by 40 of the rails, then make it a little bit bigger, all the way bigger, not just like a dressage ring bigger, but say make a 40 by 60 or something like that. And just laying rails or branches or whatever you have available down on the ground to kind of give him a pause of it's wide open. And I don't think you're going to find that the turf horse is going to see wide open and think, let's go, because you got to remember they did run between rails in that. We had an English horse that I was foolish enough to buy when I was younger at a value because he'd run off bad with a bunch of people. Of course, they were like, well, you're strong, you'll be able to hold him, which is just not the case. But he would go, he'd steeplechased in England, which usually they're good, mentally very good steeplechasing, but that horse would step literally off of the footing from the dressage arena with the former riders, touch the grass, and just boom, bolt. And he ran off with me one time in a snow field. It was like, to get him through it was like it took me about a year and a half, but I didn't probably approach it as systematic as I should have. I was young and I was like, well, I'll just handle it instead of trying to think of it of how can I reconfigure his mentality. And I think the rails would be a start of it. I'd probably make sure that when you go out to do that, you also maybe have some exercises of rails, maybe a little bit of terrain, just things to make him have kind of have to think a little bit. And then always be ahead of the game a little bit as well. If you feel him, so I always figure, especially on the forward horses, we were doing a young one out in a field the other day, and the girl that was riding it for me was a beautiful horse. He's moving along in the trot. He's really big, and he's been sent in because he had a bad rear, and he'd scared the girl. And I was like, look, you need to shorten him up. So you've got to take whatever pace he wants to go. You want to go the opposite. He wants to go forward. You want to go slow. He wants to go slow. You want to go forward, because that's how you start to make the horse think that the guidance is coming from above. And pace, because they're fight or flight animals, after you get the horses used to a saddle on them and a person above them, pace is the next thing that you have to take from the horse. Because if they're able to run or slow down, they're still in control of their emotional responses. And so I tend to go to it with I want them to have a partner that thinks the way I think. So whatever their instinct is, I want to go a little bit on a different direction. And then with that, aim at 60%. If you see him building, if you're worried about that and you go out in a field and you're walking along and you pick up trot and he starts to get a little bit fast, stay always at 60%. You can always build up to 80. It's hard if you go 80 not to let them get to 100, because that's what they're used to doing, is they're going and opening themselves up. So stay under. And what you're going to find is there's a tipping point on all of them, on those forward ones. If you go slow enough, at one point they start to go, well, what the hell? And they try to actually go to the gate below it. That's the line you want to find, and then you want to expand on that line. And you'll find it. It's not difficult, but people are always afraid to kind of really take that and say, I'm going to do this. So I'll get on one that runs and I'll make them go a little quite slow, where they're like almost thinking, well, he must want me to walk. And I don't. I want to own that end of it though.
And what if she added that he tends to react to things like leaves blowing or squirrels? So like if you have him at that 60% pace like you want him, and then leaf blows, and
you've got to bring him back.
Okay.
Yeah, fight or flight. If they can go, I can run away from it or I can attack it without the rider's input, you don't actually have possession of them. And with that hyperreactivity like that, I mean, they see when I used to go and coach in Guatemala, I was the team coach there for a while. We'd fly from the airport into Guatemala City, and the first place we would teach was directly across the road at the airport, from the airport. And there's metal corrugated walls all around this riding facility. It was crazy. And there's activity that would have caused heart attacks in our horses. And planes are coming in, and you'd have to, like, in the middle of the lesson, go and wait for it to land so you could finish what you were saying. Like, just chaos. And these horses were like, whatever. But when you took those same horses and we took them to an international competition, like in Mexico, and it was more the stuff our horses would be okay with, they were like, what the hell is that? Because they weren't exposed to that. So you have to expose them to stuff. So with that type of thing, there's two sort of thoughts with it. And there's hyperstimulating till they just go, oh my God, I can't deal with this anymore. Or the introduce them to it until they finally are comfortable with it. And the people that believe in that one hate hyperstimulating. The people that hyperstimulate often look at the other one and go, come on, you've got to own this. I actually think that both are valuable, but I do believe horses don't want to be in that state all the time. So if you take them and you have a lot of, like, get some old flags, get some banners, get like, whenever I had one like that, we used to put, like, show jump poles and attach flags to them and put them in the field with them just around the fence line, just so that they had to deal with it, so that they go, this isn't a bad thing. So I think you want to introduce the hell out of all of that on the ground, and then on top, and be on top. And I say this, and I don't want you to be like, I'm going to get on with a bag, and then the horse bolts off with you and you call me and go, you're an ass. I am. But what you have to do is you have to be able to actually, we have one that's really twitchy here at the moment, and that's the next thing I've got to do is get on him with a saddle pad and just blanket him out like a cowboy. So he goes, oh, and I think what it is they go, oh my God. And then they just are like, I hate being in this state. I can't live here. And horses are way better at choosing the right path than humans are. We put ourselves in that state, and then we tell ourselves, this is how we're supposed to function, is with all this chaos in our minds. And if we were smart, like horses, we'd go, I choose not to be this ridiculously overstimulated. Does that make sense?
Totally. I love it. We touched all the points. The next question is from Caitlin, and I love this question. I hope something comes to mind for you guys. She said, what is your favorite go-to piece of equipment, grooming tool, or item that just makes life easier?
My wife.
I'm a tool. For grooming, I mean, I'll take that because I did a lot more grooming. There's nothing that beats a rubber mitt, personally, when you're going to groom, because you can get all the oils and all the dirt and all the hair off. I think those are a handy thing to have around.
I'm going to interject on that one,
okay.
Because Jen doesn't like this at all, but I love those old cactus cloths that you rub, and it's almost like a burlap, because I think it does the same thing the rubber mitt does, but to me it feels a little bit more natural than the rubber mitt. I don't think it pulls on the hair as much, but you do get filthy dirty using them. But when Jen told me she didn't like them, I'm like, really? That's the one, it does the same sort of thing. But anyways,
Personal preference.
Yeah.
What piece of equipment? I think her girth's important.
Yeah, I like to be on a saddle. I don't like bareback riding anymore. Look, I think that some people would say neck straps. Like, honestly, I don't think that, I mean.
The right set of reins?
Yeah. I don't like leather reins. So rubber or canvas, I really don't like leather because it slips. But like, I've gone to shows before where tack has been forgotten at the farm and just borrowed everything for a horse, because I really don't care. As long as it fits them, I'm pretty easy that way. And then there comes a point where I start thinking about it too much, and then I'm always trying every different thing. But for, like, jump bits, I think everybody always has a thing they go to. Leslie Law, when I worked there and long afterwards, always would put him in a Pelham first. He just loved that bit. I always thought it was because that was how the horse wanted to go. But the reality is that when you look at it, if you're always going to the same thing, that's your bit, not the horse. John Halling goes to twisted double wire. And now John's a beautiful rider and has great hands, so he can ride that bit all day long. I've avoided those throughout my life until about 5 years ago when I was talking to him and he was like, that's what I always put in. I was like, well, okay, there's something to it. And I tried it on a horse and I liked it well enough, but it's not my go-to. Mine has always been the triple ring. Anything that's got a bit of an elevator shank to it, I love that it just feels softer. And I do love a soft mouth and a soft shape. And I think the triple ring really brings that out. So yeah, I don't know that we really have anything else. The twisted double or the barbed wire with the bicycle chain over the nose. I mean, love that. Just makes me so happy.
That's my go-to as well. Love that.
Me, not for the horse.
Yeah, true. That one's for Kyle. Okay. Courtney is asking, what exercises do you do to get your off-the-track thoroughbred to sit back on their hind end and engage in the canter? It's hard work for her, and her default when it gets hard is to fall on the forehand. Help me help her.
I think that the reality is welcome to any horse, this morning I got up, and welcome to any animal. The easiest route is usually the one that you take. Yeah. I mean, you do meet people that are a bit like over the top and they're always doing something and they get up and they go to the gym and they do all the work and all that. And sometimes I just think they're crazy. And you get horses that are a bit that way where they just hyper want to work. So the first thing with that is temperament. I don't think, say, my Gus horse, the I can't even pronounce his bloody name, the G-Star horse, is a workaholic, but he's a pleaser. So I find that when he thinks, oh, I'm making Kyle happy, he tries harder. So I'm always working on that with him. On Hudson, he takes the relaxation that I provide, and that makes him work for me. Twinkie, I have to motivate because he's on the couch. Like if you just stop, he's like, cool, I'm going to hang out and eat grass. So I have to provide motivation for him. And within that, I have to make him desire what I'm looking for. So figure out what your horse's temperament is first. But with the canter for the thoroughbreds, and I think you could throw the thoroughbred thing out. I mean, they have a different startup and they typically have a standard different maybe way of going. Every breed has some, but they're all horses. People love to get, like when I was a kid, the OTTBs, they were called horses. They weren't they didn't have a designation. And this is this big thing, but it was just a horse we rode, and that was sort of the deal with it. So circles, a small circle will stop them from bundling onto their forehand. Overbending and then straightening, because the overbend will make the horse lose the balance, and horses don't like to be unbalanced. And then you straighten them because then they can regain their balance. Start small with that, but trying to think that you take them to the inside and then straighten them. And then as they get better, you take them to the outside. Counter is an excellent tool for building on the hind leg. I mean, always counter, but if your horse is too green for the counter canter, it doesn't function the way that you want to do. So that slightly depends on, my Madison Park horse was an off-the-track thoroughbred, but that would be a very different off-the-track thoroughbred when he was 7 than when he was 4. So it depends on where they fall into the range of training. Canter pulls are horrific, but they do work. I mean, I say they're horrific because they can feel like god awful, but sometimes that god awful is what makes them kind of drop back. So I canter pulls on a fan of 5 rails, about 9 feet in the middle. So a fan shaped like that. Sorry. Like that. And then you canter them on a circle and you raise the outside of them and it'll make them kind of pop back in their shoulder. Soft hands allow the horse to do that. If you're pulling all the way through, you're going to pull them onto their forehand. It's just inevitable. And then if it's far enough along banks, jumping up banks will put them onto their hind leg. It's great. Plus, a bank will force them to shorten in their canter because they have to go this way. And then usually for a couple steps afterwards, they actually stay quite soft and good. Walk to canter always works if your horse is far enough along for that. And then just like if you go to the gym, you don't sit on one piece of equipment and just push and push and push and push because you're not going to have good form with it. You do an amount to stressed and then you do something different and then maybe you come back to it. It's about intervals. Yeah. If it can carry the canter for 10 strides, do 12, but don't do 30. Don't do 40. I'm going to guess it could do more than 10, but what else?
The circle, that's what I was going to say. The small circle, because they do like to balance themselves. Typically, they'll slow down to balance themselves. So you have to make sure then you don't let them break. But also what he just said, don't overdo it. Do it where they can hold it and then give them a break because you don't want to make them hate it. So if they do it, and that's the thing, I see people just do small circles over and over because they're like, well, that, and then the horse gets tired and struggles. So you have to make sure you show them they can do it and then they get rewarded and then do it again. I mean, that's what I really like the small circle to start with anyways.
Yeah. And it slows them down. And like Jen said, it makes them want to balance themselves. And that's the other part that I watch and I see people, they get in the horse's way. When the horse is trying to balance itself, they're trying to fix it for them. If you have a kid and you support them without question and you pay for everything and they never have to work for anything, guess what? It's going to live on you for the rest of its life. It's going to be a parasite. So your horse is the same way. If you're carrying them all the time, you can expect to be carrying them for the rest of your life. You have got to let go to allow the horse to carry itself. And then you've got to correct it. Because the same thing, if you turf your kid out on the street, that's not going to work either. Same with your horse. You balance them, show them how you want them to go, then you give it to them so that you empower them to be able to do what you're talking about.
Parenting advice and training advice all in one.
Yeah. Kids and horses all the same.
Kinsey, was it my turn or is it your turn? Okay, my turn. Catherine has a great question. I have like 12 screens set up right now. So anyways, that's why I'm looking 100 different ways. But Catherine has a great question. She said, my 4-year-old mare is now happier out in the grass fields than in the ring. Most of the time I can take her out there, so it's no big deal. But I would like to get past her nappy behavior in the ring. What are your suggestions? She slams on the brakes, pins her ears, refuses to move at all. Out in the field, she marches around, ears pricked, long top line. I'm only doing walk and trot with her a few days a week. And as much of that is hacking out as I can, weather and sunset dependent. Saddle fit, teeth, back, and feet have all been addressed. Sorry, I read that so weird.
Oh, she's 4. Is that what she said?
Yeah, 4-year-old mare.
Sounds like she'd be in a mirror.
Yeah. And I mean, I love them and I love that they do that stuff. I mean, absolutely. It just speaks to me. And because of that, when they finally come around, it is the best in the world because the horse will just throw itself anywhere for you. But you have to be more. So I was having this conversation with Lauren Spreiser and she was like, oh my God, that's a great comment. I'm going to use it. And it was something that Gina Smith said to me, but it wasn't quite the way she said it, but it was how it went into my head, which was you have to have more resistance than the horse. So when the horse resists you, your resistance has to be stronger than that. And then when that stops, you back off. If you back off when the pressure gets a little bit out of whack, if that's when you back off, you just rewarded them for bad behavior. So the trick is you got to stay away from the bad behavior. Or you've got to be willing to confront it and be like, okay, here we go. I've got to win this and just make a little win and then get the hell away from it. So when the horse gives to you and does what it's supposed to do, you must think, do I really want to go further or do I want to take it back out to the field and make it good? But it's 4. So I would work her in the open field probably more. And I wouldn't get too worked up about it not doing it yet in the ring because your job isn't to make her the best 4-year-old in the world. Your job is to make her into a great 8-year-old. So if it works well in an area right now, let her work in that area. I wouldn't, people will send me a horse like that and they'll be like, oh, you can have it for a month. You got to fix it. Well, it's a little different than if I actually get my own horse. So if you follow the Conroy Chronicle thing, you'll see last spring I was dealing with all sorts of stuff, different problem. Mine was he wouldn't hack out. He wouldn't go out into a field. He started getting really nappy, you could say, coltish, rearing, and just being obnoxious. And I didn't know, like, I know how much commitment it takes to get through it. I didn't know if I actually had it in me to do that or if I would actually get through it because he's carrying 8 pounds. It makes it a little more difficult. The mares carry something as well, but it's usually easier to get through it. What you have to understand with the mare, when I read all sorts of people's expertise on, equine behavior and all of this stuff, but the only equine behavior I learned was from the horse and from the hundreds of horses that have come through. And with the mares, and I always have gotten along well with mares, and I get on with them. I love them. They tend to respond well to me, not right off the bat, but I get them and they really do come around. And what it is mares to me, you've got two things in nature with horses. You've got stallions who are wired to challenge. So every day they're ready to fight for their herd. They're mares. They want to win. They want to have those mares to be in their herd. Then they're ready to fight that colt over there or this older stallion to gain that herd, or challengers within the herd, or chase away, other rogues that were coming over from another herd that got. So the stallion is wired to fight. So you have to approach how you deal with them a little bit differently. That doesn't mean they get to win, because you need to have the stallion on your side too. It just sometimes takes a different way to wire them in. Geldings, which don't appear in nature, obviously are missing something. And because of that, they're still going to bring some of the same traits as the stallion, but it's just a minimized in how they do it. So some geldings are incredibly difficult, but can you imagine if they just were stallions on top of that? Then your life would be maybe truly hell, even if you think it is with a gelding. The mares are wired differently. Mares, people will say that, like, oh, she's just dominant. Yeah, but in a herd of mares, you have usually a mare, the lead mare, who decides, everybody up, we got to run over there. Hey, everybody, we're going this way. And when you put a new mare into the herd, they usually kind of do a little like, and they pin their ears and they kick each other and they kind of get ugly. And then they go, whoa, 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 you're in charge. That's good. I don't need to deal with this anymore. They rarely go, wait, you're in charge, but I want to be in charge. They just are trying to figure out where they go. Where is my spot in this herd? And if I'm the least dominant one, that's okay. When a new one shows up, maybe that lowest tier one goes, well, are you okay? You're good. I don't need to challenge you anymore. The lead mare is not necessarily, in my opinion, the lead mare because she wants to be the lead mare. It's just that she is the lead mare because she hasn't found the mare that she respects enough to turn her powers over to. Okay? So your mare is looking for who's the lead mare in this relationship, and that has to be you. How do you achieve that? Well, you watch them, you know how they work, but to me, you do it intelligently in that you slowly win her habits and confidence so that you're not dealing with this. So you're going to go around it a little differently because you're going to, with your 4-year-old, you're going to work her in more pleasant situations. Then I would say, you know what? Look, so what ring is it that bothers her? Can I do a bigger arena? Can I work her, take her somewhere else where she's a little less confident? So she might start to go, well, I could use someone to help me here. And now all of a sudden you're her best friend because you're leading the way. But that's what you're looking for, is you're looking for her to go, oh, I don't feel good about this. It's all good. What's her name again? Katie?
Catherine.
Catherine. Oh, thank God Catherine's with me. And this is why I came to this conclusion, or whatever, kind of my observation. I know right now there's all sorts of professionals out there that are natural horsemen, and they know this, and that's not how horses work and stuff, and that's fine. you all have opinions. I have opinions that we've based upon what we've kind of observed and know. But when someone sends me a mare that is challenging them and giving them grief and say doing what your horse is doing, but I'm forgiving her because she's 4. And I go, okay, you're sending it in. I can get through this. And I get them to turn around and go, oh my God, you're the best. I'm going to do what you want. And they stop challenging me and they start doing what I want. And that's usually, the mares join up mentally so brilliantly. I love it. And that's it. It's usually over with, because I do believe they're looking for that interaction, that someone to be in that position or something to be in that position. But when those mares go back to their original rider and owner, I can't transfer that power to them. Those mares often go back, not always, but way more than geldings will go back and go, yeah, I remember you're beneath me. I can't give you that power. I can help the horse understand that a human can have that power. And I'm saying power, not like in an act of force, but in a sense of force. If I move, I want the horse to respond. I want them to turn to me. And sometimes it can be a little bit of a crunch time thing, but once you're through it, I mean, it's unbelievable. They just do stuff for you. But like what I've just have found is some of them go on and they're fine with the next person, but more often than not, the person is the same type of person, is the same mentality. And when they get their horse back, it doesn't take long for the horse to go, that's right. In this relationship, I'm number one. And you can't let that happen. But as you're riding a 4-year-old, you have to do this with empathy, because you can work through this problem just by being intelligent. Work outside. When you start to develop back to the ring, work outside the ring, then take her into the ring for a few minutes and take her back outside. Then work that's part of the reason we don't have fencing around our rings, because when I'm having trouble, I want to be able to exit, come back, so they don't see any one place as a place of me being in charge or them being in charge. They see every place we go as this is our partnership. And I love that feeling then. I don't know. I mean, I hope that helps, but first of all, don't panic. She's 4. You've got a place where she works well. At the same time, keep it in your mind that you're going to have to panic, because if she starts to draw the line somewhere else, she's now training you. And that's what you want to avoid. And then the problem is, the more that happens, the harder it is to get through it. And those are the ones when people send them in, that now we've gotten to the point where I think we just like it used to be this like, send it in, I'll deal with it for a month or whatever. Like it was, people want to send the Cowboys do the same thing. Well, that was sort of the job. And now I'm like, you know what? I'm not doing it on your timeline anymore. I want to do it on the horse's timeline, because I really actually want this to be an enjoyable experience. But the longer someone lets that build up, let's face it, the next person gets on, that horse is going to be like, why should I listen to you? And the longer that resistance is built up, the more confirmed it is. The same way, the longer the submission is built up, the more confirmed it is. So work her in a place that she's submissive. I think that's a big part of it. You can do the groundwork, the natural horsemanship, anything like that in the ring. Work her over poles in hand, lunge her in the ring, do stuff with her, just push those boundaries, but maybe just not the riding yet. But know it's coming, because otherwise she's going to own you.
I think that's really, really good advice. I'm also thinking of Kathy Barr has a program on the app, and it's for separation anxiety, but it might be helpful here. One of the, like, a couple of lessons are called like Me and My Shadow or something, and it's just building that bond. So might be useful, but I thought they were really interesting. So that was great, Kyle. Okay, so I am gonna big transition from that question to a couple of Anna's questions here. Well, the first of one isn't really a question, more so a statement, but Anna would like for you guys to go to Minnesota to do a clinic, which I think you guys should do. So I'm committing you guys to that. I'm not even going to form it as a question.
Olaf is there.
And okay, so the first real question from Anna is, if you could eat one thing for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Cat. Yeah, no, for sure. I love cat. Honestly,
Popcorn. I mean, that hands down for me.
grapes, apples, apples. I would say ice cream, but I know that would get old. But yeah, no, fruit, apples for sure.
What type of apple is your favorite?
Honeycrisp at the right point, Brayburn in the fall. When I lived in England, there was an apple orchard between the barn and the paddocks, and I'd when it was ripe, I'd go down every day. Every time I go down, every time on the way back, and I don't even know what they were, but I love apples.
Kyle can even make that a long answer.
Jen, what do you got him? Jen, what do you like on your popcorn? Just butter?
No butter, just salt.
Oh,
Yeah.
just salt.
Just salt.
Lots of
Yeah.
salt.
Well, I mean, okay, not lots of salt, medium salt.
Okay, great answers.
What do you guys?
Yeah, what are you
We're
guys?
gonna make you guys answer this.
Jessa?
Wow, I wasn't even thinking about what my answer would be, but pasta probably, like spaghetti, a classic spaghetti with red sauce and Parmesan.
Yeah, I would say I could eat that for every meal for the rest of my life for sure. Pasta with red sauce. That's a good one. Or cereal, which I don't actually, feels like a cop out because I don't actually purchase cereal, because if I do, I will eat an entire box in one day. But I love cereal. Kara is saying no one is just choosing cheese, which, Kara, there is obviously cheese on our pasta.
Yeah,
But
and with apples.
and well, cheese is good with apples. I love it. Yeah.
No cheese on the popcorn. Though. Sorry.
No cheese, yeah. We got to draw our line somewhere. But cheese is a great one. Necessary. Okay, so Anna's are relatively quick. So here's another one. What is one piece of farm equipment you can't live without?
Oh, a mower
A hammer.
or a hammer.
Gotta have a chainsaw.
Yeah, I don't use that, but a
Yeah.
hammer and a mower.
Nice. Those are great. Good job, Kyle. That was really good. One word.
Yeah.
We all notice him exercising restraint right there.
No, it's like I got more.
Okay. If you could change something about your farm, setup, or land, what would it be?
Huh.
I would, yeah, the people we bought this from, it was an ostrich farm when we bought it. And before that was a Pasofino farm. It's 57 acres. And they hated the one neighbor. He was a real, like, he was that neighbor. Like, he pointed guns at us. Like, he was like just an horrible psycho. He beat his wife, put her in the hospital. Like, I'm talking like the worst. So they hated him. So what did they do? They built the hay barn and our horse barn right beside his house, so that there was so to irritate him. When you put a horse farm together, you put the barn near the middle of the property, so your paddocks radiate out from it, and that way it's most convenient to work on.
Yeah.
Our barn is off to the side, so the paddocks are, you do some traveling to put the paddocks, to get to the paddocks and stuff. So I would totally change that. I always think about if we won the lottery, I would turn that barn into a car museum for me. And there's a place that I'd put a really lovely 20-stall barn that's got this huge oak tree. We've got trees everywhere, but it'd just be a perfect place. And I'd put a different driveway in. So they just didn't set that up well. The rest of the farm, we've had lots of time to work here, and we're always changing things up. And honestly, I think we got it right now. Is just about right. Just need to keep up on it.
Yeah, I agree. I'd move the barn. I'd probably irrigate our paddocks because right now it's really dry. So.
Good answers. Really interesting. Grace has some hard-hitting questions. I'll ask one of them so we can try to hit as many people as possible. She said, many times I've competed against 5-star riders despite being an amateur myself. Do you think shows should split up the divisions more like the hunter jumper world does?
Oh, there's so many thoughts on this. I personally don't, because I think, with eventing, it's so much different anyways. There's so many more unknowns because you have three things you're doing with the horse, not just going in and jumping the same course. So I think I don't know. I always just feel, now I've ridden at the 5-star level, but even before that, I always felt like if you do well against some of those riders, what a great sense of accomplishment. I don't know. But I also get the other point where they always feel like they don't get the ribbons they should get. So I do understand.
I get beat a lot by people that you're like sort of the amateur, the young rider. And I know that some of like I had one come up to me a few years ago. I was like, I beat you at and I'm like, well, that's not difficult. But there's a couple of things. One, if you're an amateur or a young rider and you only have 1 or 2 horses, you have an advantage over me because I can only put so much time to the horses. And if I'm riding a young horse or a lower level horse, chances are things are not fully confirmed the way they could be for you. So I should be less competitive. Obviously I have more knowledge, but I'm gonna have to work harder for it probably on the day because I'm not showing up as prepared as a lot of the amateurs I compete against in those levels. So I don't think it should be separate. In the hunters, they do it, but in the hunters, the professional shows up on the fanciest horse and is competing in that level because that's the only level it can do. Whereas ours are developing upwards typically. I know when I first moved out here, being able to compete as a young rider, being able to compete against people that were like top riders, it made me try more. Being beat by them was part of it, but like I said, the scoreboard doesn't always mean that much to me, so I think of it a little differently. But I think that there's an advantage, and there's a lot of times I remember when we were in Canada, there was a guy that rode up there, Dick Bailey. I'll never forget it. He rode prelim. He worked for the university, smart guy, great rider, super demeanor. The horses loved him. He had 2 horses, that's it. And him and his wife did it all themselves, and they went to all the shows. Dick must have won more prelim events than I have ever won in my life. Everything.
You never wanted to be in the division with Dick Bailey.
Yeah, and this wasn't like he did that for a year. Like for years on end, like 10, 15 years. We went to events. He never went he'd gone intermediate like once or twice, but prelim was his level because he knew he could manage the horses at that. They did a great job. They were always turned out well, but it didn't matter where Dick showed up. He was going to win. He was going to beat you. And the most lovely people in the world, really knowledgeable and everything, but I never had an advantage over him. And it was just, it's incredible. Yeah. When you beat Mr. Poppers down here with Penny. Oh,
I love my horse.
Yeah, I love my horse is the tax horse. She owns it. Well, Penny on Mr. Poppers, I see him in the division. I'm like, God damn it, here we go. That's the street cred that I think we all should be kind of riding for. And to separate it out, the problem is it doesn't then people start looking at the numbers and the numbers just don't always correlate. So I don't think it should change. I like this. Like we're all in this together. If I'm in the warm up and I see something or I know something and someone asks me, I'm willing to tell them. It's not like I'm trying to keep my advantage to myself because I want you to do well too. Yes, I want to beat you, but I want to beat you because my horse is going right, not because we're just, competing against each other. But, I think that's always someone's personality.
Yeah, I think it's a really fair answer. Kara's question is, what is the best advice a coach ever gave you?
Oh my God.
That's a really good question. We should have that as a preview because then we know how to answer it.
Wow, this might take a while.
I'm gonna go with 3, okay? Just because they stand out and like I'm old, so they stand out. That means it meant something. First one is, and I use this all the time, you got to be motivated by failure. In this sport, you're not going to be motivated by success. And I don't remember what coach said it to me. I just know it was said to me at some point, and I was like, yeah, because you're going to lose more than you win no matter who you are. So you've got to be motivated by the failure because the failure is what's going to keep you going. If you think being successful is going to be the motivation, get into a different sport because this one's going to kill you. Ian Miller, in a clinic I took when I was a young rider, he did a junior jumper. I was doing junior jumpers, and he did a thing around Canada. They hired him to do clinics throughout Canada. He went and did it for about 4 or 5 years. And I did 1 year and another year. And the first year I rode in front of him, I was like, oh, I'm going to ride in front of Ian. I'm going to be so great. And he's going to think I'm amazing. And probably the 10th fence in, my horse stopped and I fell off over his head into this jump and, sent rails everywhere. And he was like, all right, look, you might learn nothing else this weekend, but when you fall off, you've got to tuck your head and roll. So when you hit the ground, roll. And he explained why and all that. And the next year he came out and did the clinic, and I'm like, here I go. I'm going to ride for you. I'm going to be so incredible. Obviously, I'm really good. And I fell off again. But when I hit the ground, he was like, you roll. You learned something from last year. That's the most important thing. And it's true, because you're going to dissipate energy and you're not going to get as broke when you roll. It's just that simple. And then when you ride one bad horse, you need to have 3 good ones behind them to make sure your habits don't become bad. So I was riding a bad show jumper, and I asked a trainer I used to work with named Claudia Kojakar. She's out in British Columbia. She's amazing. And I asked her, I was like, well, what advice would you have for me for that horse? Because I thought he was great. And she thought about it. She's like, well, look, when you're riding a horse like that, I'm waiting for how I get him to jump clean. She's like, you got to make sure you ride 3 good ones so that you don't end up developing bad habits riding the bad one. And I was like, I thought he was a good horse. I was like, well, that's offensive. But it's true. Bad horses will make you create bad habits. I'm not saying you shouldn't ride difficult, but you should definitely make decisions that make you ride better. So now Jen's got to answer.
No, I'm good. Kyle answered. It's good.
Cop out.
I know.
Well, I have a final question for you guys that we've been ending. I don't even know. I guess maybe it was pre our hiatus when we've ended a few of these this way. But my question is, what's one easy thing that you would recommend for listeners to do? And the example I give is like, I heard this on another podcast, and the recommendation was drink a large glass of water first thing when you wake up. So it could be horse related or not horse related, just something that you feel like might be a nice touch to what people are doing. There you go.
I thought you were going to say drink a large glass of wine. I was like, well, this is going to be really weird.
Right.
For anyone listening, Kyle just pointed to his pat your horse sticker.
I mean, I think the thing is that and I wish I could, I think we're always trying to find that balance, and certainly I have lost touch with it multiple times. And right now I'm certainly on that trembling edge of the chaos, but you've got to remember that it's supposed to be, and I'm going to say fun, but it's not like, oh, it's fun, it's joyous, but you have to get that emotional connection out of it. It's not about the ribbon's important. I want to win, all that nonsense. I want to go up the levels. I want to go to the Olympics again. There's all these things, but God, just remember how precious this is. When you can't do it anymore, remember how much you wanted to do it, so that you can come back to this in your dreams and in your thought processes. But like, try really hard not to lose that feeling that brought you into it. And it's so hard because look, everybody's putting stuff out there, and you have a bad day, and it's like, I'm the worst. I come out of the ring, I'm like, I should just quit. I suck. This is terrible. And I was talking to William Fox Pitt about it. He was kind of saying the same thing, and the same thing exactly. He said it. He was like, you just got to remember God, we still get to do this. Like, this is such a pleasure to connect with these sentient beings that have this emotional well that they're willing to give you. And when they give it to you, it can buoy you up. But if you are not open to it, it doesn't matter what ribbon you get. It's horrible. Like, you're blackening your soul.
I'm not sure that was the easy answer.
No, sorry.
I just say try and enjoy the moment. So along with what he said, I mean, we're all lucky to have horses. So
yeah, God, I wish I could do it better.
So he should enjoy the moment. basically is what I'm saying. Try
Yeah.
and enjoy the moment.
I'm trying. I did today.
Advice from Jen directly to Kyle.
Yes.
Well, we just hit the hour, and I'm so happy to be back, and I'm so happy to be back with you guys. So thank you again. We really, it is not lost on us how busy you are, how many other things you could be doing. So thank you for taking the time to spend with us and with everyone who's here or listening after the fact. We greatly appreciate it.
Well, we are so glad to be back with you.
Yeah, we
And
missed you
I
guys.
mean, congratulations on surviving boot camp. Like I said to you midway through, I think part of it is actually just trying to find out who will break with all the effort that is required. And you guys, I mean, absolutely nailed it. So going forward, I'm sure this is going to make this all so much more successful. And it's all because you guys put in that work. So good for you. God.
Exactly.
1 week ago, I bet you guys feel so much better now.
I feel like a new person. Yes, it was all the things you're talking about, though. It definitely was worth it. Like, we are better for it, and the business will be better for it. But wow, what an experience. We'll definitely go into this more with you guys. But yes, glad to be on the other side for sure.
Do you guys wake up sometimes now and go, look, oh my God, I've got to, oh God, I don't have to do it anymore?
No, but I did wake up a lot of times during those 13 weeks feeling that way. Like, I mean, you've talked about it before too, Kyle, when you're like, well, I guess I got to get out of bed and go figure this out.
We should actually do one of these with you guys discussing all of that and what you found. I mean, that would be, I mean, it might not be horse related, but I do think it all is related to interconnected anyways.
Totally. And a lot of the mentorship we got like extends to everything, which is so interesting. So yes, we'd be happy to do that. And we'll find time for it. And in the meantime, you guys hopefully you can wind down for your night now. And we will chat with you soon. And thank you to everyone who attended.